Good evening. I'm calling to order the regular meeting of the Fairfax Town Council, June 1, 2022. Michelle, will you do a roll call, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goddard.
I'm here.
Councilmember Ackerman.
I'm present.
Councilmember Kohler. Vice Mayor Cutrano
Present.
and Mayor Hillman,
I'm here.
all present.
And may I get a motion to approve the agenda and affidavit of posting?
So
I'll move that.
I'll second.
Okay, I heard motion Kohler and second.
Is that,
Excuse me, if I may,
We're continuing some items, aren't we?
continuing some items, but let's do that.
Oh,
This is Janet, I'm
very,
sorry.
very good point. Thank you.
I made the motion, but I don't know what items you want to continue. So somebody who does know probably should make the motion.
Yeah. Chance, do you want to do that or do you want me to do that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I'm happy to make the motion to approve the agenda and affidavit of posting while continuing item the public hearing item 19, discussing the fiscal year budget.
Right.
And also continuing item 21, outdoor dining.
Okay.
I can second that, but just one question for the town attorney. Do we have to say continue to a regular meeting for item 19?
Yeah, both of them are continued to the June 15th meeting, the special
But do
meeting.
we have to say regular meeting or special meeting?
No, they can both be continued to a special meeting
Okay. I'll
That-
second that
on June 15th.
on June 15th.
Would you
Okay.
like me to take a roll call
Yeah. Thank you.
vote? That is, Councilmember Goddard,
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman,
Yes.
Councilmember Kohler,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cutrano,
Yes.
and Mayor Hillman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so just to reiterate for the public, we are continuing the proposed operating and capital improvement budget hearing item, as well as the introduction of the ordinance related to outdoor dining, item number 21, to the special meeting on the 15th of June. Okay, we have nothing to report from our closed session at 6:15 this evening. And Barbara, would you like to read the land acknowledgement?
Sure. Let me turn to it first. Okay, the Fairfax Town Council acknowledges that we are located on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok people of present-day Marin County. We honor with gratitude the land itself and all of its ancestors, past, present, and emerging. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get into meeting protocol, I have a couple of announcements and invite any other council members if they have any. I'm sad to hear about another shooting this afternoon, mass shooting that is in Tulsa, killed 4 individuals. And I'm proud that our town was one of the first jurisdictions to participate in the county's gun buyback program, which is taking place this Saturday, June 4th at 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So it's $100 for handguns, rifles, shotguns, and $200 for assault weapons. And you drive up and there's no questions asked. It's anonymous. Boxed ammunition will also be accepted. So thank you for that. And then there's also another event on June 4th. It's National Gun Violence Awareness Day. You're encouraged to wear orange. It's also this Saturday at 11:30. It's a Golden Gate Bridge walk. And I went to a interfaith candle vigil for Uvalde last night in Tiburon, and some statistics were shared that I'd like to share. Since in 2004, the federal ban on assault weapons expired, and since then, mass shootings have tripled. There's a correlation between the availability of guns and the resulting violence. In 1994, when the ban went into effect, there were 400,000 AR-15 style rifles in America, and now there's over 20 million. We have more guns in this country than people. And since Sandy Hook, there have been almost 3,900 mass shootings. There have been 230 mass shootings in our country since January. A mass shooting is an incident in which 4 or more people are killed or wounded. And so far this year, there have been at least 78 incidents of gunfire on school grounds. Since last Tuesday, when 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered in Uvalde, there have been 18 more mass shootings. So it's very humbling, and I think we're all really struggling with a lot of emotions related to this. There's many, many ways to act, and I hope you do in whatever fashion you feel comfortable. And thank you again. Okay, we have our Fairfax Festival. I think it's our 43rd annual after a 2-year hiatus. So that is some really happy news. And there's a team of volunteers working very hard to produce this 2-day event. So I feel very grateful and excited about this event next weekend. Any other council members have anything to share? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just thank you, Mayor, for your comments. And just one further comment on the Fairfax Festival. The festival is currently seeking volunteers, folks that want to help out either with the festival itself or with the parade in some capacity. And you can go to fairfaxfestival.com, and under Get Involved, there's a drop down to volunteer. You can reach out and find out how you can get involved for the festival. Just wanted to also acknowledge that tomorrow, Marin Water is conducting their next community workshop for their strategic water supply assessment. And they're all held on Zoom at 5 p.m. And you can find that at marinwater.org. And they're just really informative ways to learn about what's going on in the region and things that'll affect our community as it relates to water supply looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Moving on to meeting protocol. The mayor shall maintain order at the meeting. The council and the audience are expected to refrain from using profane language and or ridiculing the character or motives of council members, staff, or members of the public, and to maintain the standards of tolerance and civility. The town council will review the agenda at 10 p.m. to ascertain which items, if any, will be continued to another meeting. Any matter not started by 11:30 p.m. will be continued to an adjourned or regular council meeting unless the council votes to suspend this rule. Our open time for public expression up to 30 minutes. This is the time to address the council on matters not on the agenda. Individuals are limited to 3 minutes, subject to the mayor's discretion. The council is not permitted to take action, and state law strictly limits the right of council to discuss any unagendized item unless it can be demonstrated to be an emergency nature or the need to take immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda. If there are still hands raised after 30 minutes, open time will be continued to the end of the agenda. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. The council may approve the entire consent calendar with one action or vote.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
did you want to take the open time comments before we move on to consent?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Just moving far too quickly. I see 2 hands.
Yes. Let me just start the timer. All right. So the first speaker is Frank Egger, followed by Josephine Winagel. And Frank, you're unmuted now.
Thank you, Michelle. Frank Egger, Meadowway, Fairfax. Some contractors are cutting trees in Fairfax. They're cutting them on private property and they're cutting them on public property. 7 large native trees were cut on public park property, the parking area for the Women's Club and Perry Park. It's right across the street from the Women's Club. These trees were cut without approval of the Fairfax Tree Committee. No tree removal permits were approved. They were not even applied for. Those native bay trees were located in an underground utility district. Fairfax undergrounded a downtown utility district years ago. There are no electrical lines over those properties, and there are no electric lines over the parcel across from the Women's Club where the trees were cut. Fairfax has stopped the state and special districts from spraying pesticides on Fairfax, and Fairfax can enforce its tree removal permit. You need to contact who's ever cutting these trees and get their attention and tell them they're violating Fairfax town codes. That's the only way to stop all this unauthorized cutting that's going on, and especially when they're cutting in Fairfax town park properties. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Josephine Winagel, and you are unmuted now.
Great. Good evening. Good evening, council members and mayor. My name is Joseph Bunagel, and for all the rest of you, I am a Fairfax resident living on Wood Lane, and I'm here tonight speaking as the Fairfax representative on the Marin Commission on Aging, as well as Age Friendly Fairfax. And for those of you who are Fairfax residents, that means I'm a contact for you if you have something that you would like me to know about with regard to older adults at Fairfax, and you could reach out to the town and they could get a message to me. 2 quick notes I wanted to share tonight. The first is that tomorrow is the June Marin Commission on Aging meeting, to which all are always invited. The educational portion of tomorrow's meeting starts at 10 and focuses on transportation in Marin. There's presenters Lee Zhang from the Transportation Authority of Marin and Robert Betts with Marin Transit. And participants will learn about the Transportation Authority of Marin and how it serves Marin, and understand what Marin Transit and Marin Access do and what their plans are for pandemic recovery and beyond. So transit is important. It matters to all of us. And so I think there's something that we can learn tomorrow. These meetings are always open to the public, and the event information and Zoom link is currently posted on Nextdoor as well as other locations. And then a second, hopefully I still have time, a second quick item reminder is there is a phone number and a website where you can get information about services for older adults in Marin County. It's the phone number is a warm line, which means it's staffed Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 by social workers. And someone may answer, or you may leave a message depending on if they're available at the moment or not. The phone number is 415-473-INFO, I-N-F-O. And those numbers in numbers are 415-473-4636. You can ask questions about all kinds of services for older adults, issues or concerns, services or programs. And this concludes my comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine.
The next speaker is Rebecca Collins, and you're unmuted now.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to all the town council members, and thank you for what you've been doing to try to help us and protect us from what's been going on with PG&E. On my property, they want to cut 75 trees in a very high landslide area. There's like 3 landslides, in 10 minutes walking from my house. It would literally cause the soil on my property to flush into the Fairfax Creek if I allowed them to continue. And I also want to say to all the property owners who may be listening, you have the right to refuse having PG&E cut your trees to the ground. That is very important to know. It even states in their own brochure that this is a voluntary program. Their enhanced vegetation management program is a voluntary program. The CPUC requires a 4-foot radius from their equipment to be clear of vegetation. Also, all other IOUs, including the second and largest in the state, Southern Cal Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric, have successfully mitigated for wildfires by focusing primarily on infrastructure modernization featuring reinforced triple insulated conductor wire, new poles, modernized support equipment, and computerized circuit breakers. This is a climate change issue. Our utility is not bringing their equipment up to 21st century standards. We are in a situation that is only going to get more difficult. Even their own ex-CEO says you can cut every tree in California and you will still have wildfires. So it makes sense to fix the system than to unnecessarily cut down millions of more trees in California. They're cutting into the salmon habitat area. The place across from my own property is a state restoration project. It is 20 feet from the Fairfax Creek. It's got Arnold Schwarzenegger's like insignia on it right there. They had no knowledge of conditions on the ground. They didn't care to ask. I found the notice on the side of the road. It's obscene. So thank you for everything. And against this bill, SB 396, which would codify our experience that we've been having here on the ground. It's not a small thing. It's a huge, huge issue. And thank you. Please, interact with the legislature to stop this bill. Thank you so much.
The next speaker is Adrian Schanker, and you're unmuted now.
Hi, I'm Adrian Schanker. I'm the new executive director of the SPAR Center, which serves Marin County's LGBTQ and HIV communities, including residents of Fairfax. And we are thrilled to be providing some of our services in the town of Fairfax, most recently in the expansion of our harm reduction service into Fairfax. I was really thrilled to see and to meet with Mayor Hellman and to hear about your support of Pride Month, which starts today. And we had great events today at the Marin County Office of Education and the City of Novato raising the Pride flag. We'd love to come and join you to raise the Pride flag as well. We just wanted to express our gratitude to the council for recognizing Pride Month.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deborah Benson, and you're unmuted now.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, council members. Thank you so much, especially Mayor Hellman, for everything, and Barbara Kohler for whatever you have been doing to try to, in fact, have stopped for the moment PG&E from coming through our town and butchering our trees. And also hopefully for opposing SB 396. Which would allow them to do what they're doing already. I don't think they really have the parameter to do what they're doing right now. It's ironic that these fires are in part due to climate change, and everyone in the world is saying plant a tree to fight climate change, and PG&E is cutting down hundreds of trees. So whatever you can do to keep this up, please do. If there's anything I can do, I did discuss this with the tree committee at the last meeting. Members of the tree committee are willing to step up and be helpful in whatever way we can. I myself did look at about 20 trees on a list that PG&E gave to Mark Lockerbie, saying that they were all to be taken out because they were dead or diseased, and only 2 looked compromised. So if we can be helpful in that way, I'm certainly up for it. And 2 of the members who were at the last tree committee meeting expressed interest in being helpful as well. So again, thank you. I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you all.
Thank you. The next speaker is PJ, and you are unmuted now.
Hi, I'd like to echo all of the comments with respect to PG&E's efforts to cut down trees without proper approval. I'd also like to highlight that PG&E has been coming onto people's property without authorization. I myself saw someone tagging a tree on my property for removal, and I went out and had a conversation and had to specifically request and call the PG&E hotline number I was given to make sure that they only cut down branches that were within the specified radius of the power line instead of them tagging my tree for removal in whole. I'd also like to point out that there have been plenty of studies showing how tree cover actually helps keep ambient temperatures in neighborhoods lower, which is important for mitigating the effects of climate change and keeping our neighborhoods and grounds cooler, thus reducing our water need. So this is clearly an issue that we should remain focused on. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mark Bell, and you're unmuted now.
Thank you, Michelle. Couple items. First off, as you can continue your hubris with your land acknowledgement and refuse to even mention the Neanderthals who lived here before the Miwoks, who the Miwoks eviscerated, thereby taking their land unceded as it was. As far as PG&E cutting down trees, if it's illegal, then they need to replace like with like. If they cut down a 200-year oak tree, they need to replace it with a 200-year oak tree. If they cut down a 300-year redwood tree, they need to replace it with a 300-year redwood tree. And when you start totaling that up, you'll see a much better bit of compliance. And the other item I noticed is as I went through the agenda, more and more items are showing up on the consent calendar. And when people from the public say that they would like to discuss them, those requests are totally ignored, I'd say over 99% of the time. So, I mean, there's a lot of taxes on there. There's some other issues. It just ends up there without public comment. And it really reminds me of the Res-J committee, which would, to cut down public comment, have an item and have 8 sub-items under that and give someone 3 minutes to address 8 items. Here we have, how many was it? 16, 18 items on the consent calendar. And yet the public is supposed to have only 3 minutes to comment on all 18. I think that's a violation of the Brown Act. And this has been going on and getting worse over the past couple of years. And so I think you need to go and look at this again. And especially when people ask to pull an item, there may be other people who would like to see that item pulled. But even in respect to the people who are funding this town with property taxes, et cetera, you know, there should be some respect. If they're looking at an item and they took the time to, you know, watch the meetings and try to be up to date and they don't get why this is happening, they should have the opportunity to speak on it. And I don't understand why you continue to flout the Brown Act like you did with the Res-J committee. And so that's my points for this evening on this.
Thank you. The next speaker is MY. You are unmuted now. It's your hand is raised and I've unmuted you. Would you like to speak? You might have to turn up your volume. Madam Mayor, would you like to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. I see no further raised hands. If you want to close the open
I
time.
will close open time for public expression now. And we'll move on to consent calendar. The council may approve the entire consent calendar with one action or vote. In the alternative, items on the consent calendar may be removed by any town council or staff member for a separate discussion and vote. The opportunity for public comment on consent will occur prior to the council's vote on the consent calendar. Okay, I have a few comments and questions myself. I didn't see whose hand was raised. I'll just go with order of my visual here. Vice Mayor Catrono.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just had a question for Janet. We emailed back and forth a little bit about item 8, which is the open space acquisition for the Upper Ridgeway parcel. And I had just noted that it was the type of process that we'd be undertaking to acquire it is a tax default sale as opposed to tax foreclosure. I was just wondering, Janet, since it doesn't really matter, can we use the most correct language that's in the county's code, just so we're all good with like the most exact language that we know?
We're not talking about county code, we're talking about state code. And what I would suggest, if you want us to look at that to add more specific language to it, is that we can clarify that with more specific language, and we just won't try to craft that language right now, but we will definitely add into that resolution clarifying language as to the type of sale.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Kohler.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on number 8. I don't want to pull it, but I can wait till after public comment.
Okay. Councilmember Goddard.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I have a comment on item 12. Would you rather me wait until after public comment?
Yeah, let's do that if you don't mind.
Thanks.
And then I have comments and questions, but I'm just going to raise my clarifying question now on item number 5, which is the 5 resolutions setting taxes. I'm not seeing, essentially, these are all essentially no changes from last year. Is that correct, Michael or Janet or?
So there is some changes. The biggest one is probably on the debt service one. We went from a rate of 0.0265 to 0.025, so that's a lowering of the tax for the debt service. And then the second one would be for the municipal services tax. That is currently at $200 per unit. Per the ordinance, it goes up by $5 per year. So the rate that's there is an increase of $5 per the ordinance to $205.
Right, but that's set in motion every year. That's what
Yeah.
That was the one that I noted that there was a change, but that was essentially pre-approved.
Well, yeah. I mean, you still have to vote on it. It did change. So, but
Yeah.
it's not a same kind of a change as we did with the debt service one.
And I'm sorry, the first one that you spoke of was the pension obligations one. Is that what you said?
No, it's the Measure K street bonds.
Which
Is
one?
that number E, Mike?
E, okay.
So I guess I misunderstood the statement. It says the tax rate of 0.0250 per $100 assessed valuation is the same as last year's assessment. So I interpreted this as no change.
No, it should have said that it's less than last year's.
Okay. Did the clerk capture that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I did capture that.
Okay, let's capture that for the minutes too, please. Okay, let's move on to public comment on consent. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Just a moment. All right, sorry, operating a lot of equipment back here. So looks like we have several raised hands. The first speaker is Larry Bragman, followed by Frank Egger. And Larry, you're unmuted now.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to thank you for getting the street closure resolution together for the Fairfax Festival. It's going to launch again or relaunch on June 10th. We're going to have the film at Contratti Field. It's an all outdoor festival this year because of the pandemic. And just want to thank the support of Mayor Hellman, Councilmember Goddard, Councilmember Cutrano, town staff Janet and Elena, and our assistant Allison for helping us put together what I think is going to be a really good festival, all outdoor. We're still in the pandemic, so hopefully people are going to stay safe, keep social distance as much as they can. There's a lot of good music. All three music venues are going to be up and running. So hope to see everybody there. And thanks again.
Thank you. The next speaker is Frank Egger, followed by Jack Judkins. And Frank, you're unmuted now.
Thank you, Michelle. Frank Egger, Meadowway, Fairfax. I'm just speaking on item 6, and it's a resolution confirming and levying the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority tax for the fiscal year 2022-23. As many of you know, all the other towns and districts are running a tax measure on their current ballot in June for a slight rate increase to continue the Paramedics Authority tax. Fairfax initiated the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority in 1981, 5 towns, 2 fire districts, and the county of Marin. And 1982 was the beginning of the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority. Fairfax has always run their paramedic tax elections with the other 7 agencies, since they can have kind of a joint a joint promotion for supporting the tax increase from all 8 agencies. And I'm wondering why Fairfax is not included in the June primary election for an increase for the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jack Judkins.
Would you, before Jack Judkins speaks, Madam Mayor, would you like for me, I can point out that we will have ours on, the Ross Valley Paramedic tax will be on, it'll be on November, so you will see that come before you.
And those who are actually running it in June have competing tax measures with the November ballot. That's why we're going for what was initially recommended, which is the November ballot.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's on the November ballot or no?
Yeah. Madam Mayor, this is Michelle Gardner, town clerk, who wrote that staff report. I can just clarify that we have our regular election in November, and that tax was adopted by the people of Fairfax in November of 2018. And so next November would be the appropriate time for us to renew the tax measure. And at an upcoming council meeting, probably the next one, or perhaps July, there will be an opportunity for the council to call for an election for that tax measure.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, the next speaker is Jack Judkins, followed by MY. And Jack, you are unmuted now.
Thank you, Michelle. Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council, as you know, I am the Vice Chair of the Fairfax Open Space Committee. I'm calling to comment on agenda item number 8, by which the town would approve an agreement with Most to fund the purchase of 2 parcels and for the town manager to take all necessary steps to achieve that purpose. I want to thank you in advance for approving this agenda item on the consent calendar tonight. It's taken some time to get it to you, and I'm grateful that it is now in front of you. I support Council Member Catrano's request that the resolution be revised so that it accurately reflects the kind of tax default sale that is involved here. And that could be simply done by changing the third whereas so that it reads at the end, instead of as the result of a tax foreclosure sale, instead as a result of a tax default sale pursuant to Chapter 8 of Part 6 of Division 1 of the California Revenue and Taxation Code. I'm basing this request on the fact that I have had several conversations in the past with the individual who handles these, supervises these Chapter 8 sales through agreements with towns and the like. And she wants clarity that we are actually going to be entering into an agreement pursuant to the Chapter 8 process with the county to purchase pursuant to tax default sale. So simple change, and I appreciate the town attorney's willingness to consider that change tonight. So I think that this is these two parcels are would be a great addition to the town's open space. They are adjacent to two other open space parcels and already owned by the town, and also to open space that's held by the town of San Anselmo. I also want to point out that this purchase is being made possible through the generosity of the Marin Open Space Trust, who has offered to donate the full purchase price to the town for these two parcels. And under tax default sale, those purchase prices are upwards of around $45,000. With that, I'd also like to mention that I believe Bill Long is expecting to say a few words to you as well. And so not necessarily wanting to dictate who goes next, but this might be an appropriate time for him to give his public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is MY. You are unmuted now. We can't hear you, so I can see that you're unmuted on your end and on my end. I'm not sure if your mic is not plugged in. You might check the connection because we can't hear you.
Michelle, are we able to take Bill Long after this individual?
That's at the discretion of the mayor. I usually answer. I call on people in the order they appear.
Got it. Thank you.
Is my or MY trying to speak? Or that person dropped? Okay.
Okay.
I'm fine with taking Mr. Bill Long at this point.
Okay. And so I see Mr. Long's hand raised, and I'm unmuting you now. You're unmuted. You might have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm the chair of MOST, Marin Open Space Trust, and I want to say that we are pleased to be able to work with you, with your Open Space Committee, and secure this property. It's been the object of your open space advocates and committee members for many years. And we have an opportunity now that I think we're well positioned to take advantage of if the property owner shows up and pays the past due taxes. Well, the sale won't go through this time. But if he doesn't, then this property can be added to the the open space areas that are so important to your town. And so I want to thank your council. I want to thank your town attorney. And I particularly want to thank the generous donor who has been a supporter of most for a number of years, who strongly endorsed this acquisition. So thanks very much. And we look forward to a successful conclusion at some point in the near future. Appreciate it.
Thank you. The next speaker is Virginia Balog Rosenthal, and followed by Alan. Virginia, you're unmuted now. Virginia Balog Rosenthal, you're unmuted now. Oh, no. I think we hear you if you want to speak.
Go ahead.
Oh, Christ, this is aggravating.
We can hear you now, Virginia.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so anyway, I live on Ridgeway. I live right by the fire road there. And I have a neighbor who has lives next to a parcel that the town bought. And he said that no one ever, turn that off, please. No one ever cleans it up. The parcel that's near his house is like tons of flammable wood and chips and plants. And the concern is that, well, you know, who's going to clean it up? Who's going to maintain the space? Who's going to make sure that it's, you know, fire-wise safe? And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Alan. And you are unmuted now.
I want to echo the sentiments made by the last speaker. I too live next to some open space, and the open space is truly part of what makes this town so special. It really invigorates, it really adds to the quality of life. But detracting from this quality of life is something we've all had to endure for years now, which is the threat of wildfire. And I too have witnessed space that is publicly owned, that is not cared for properly. And I'm wondering what the city will do to ensure that this opportunity, which I relish, I want the open space, but I want to be safe and secure in my home. I want to know that this isn't adding to the fire danger we all live under threat with. I want to make sure that the city is allocating in its budget enough to maintain some upkeep so that the tinder, that the refuge, the flammable detritus of these plants is somehow pruned in some fashion so that it doesn't add to the threat of wildfire. And that's what I have to say, because quite frankly, what I've witnessed in the past is this city being very eager to obtain the open space and at the same time not doing the follow through that's necessary to keep its citizens secure. And that's my comment.
Mayor, can I just add one thing, not to go back and forth, but as part of the money that will be spent as part of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, it's for defensible space in our area for town-owned parcels as well. So I'll follow up on meeting with our town manager on that so we can make sure we make sure those properties are safe. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I think we got an email about it, so we could get back to that resident too. Thank you.
Okay, and the next speaker is MTCC. You're unmuted now. MTCC, you're unmuted now. Or maybe that's Michael McIntosh. We can't hear you.
MTCC, it's your turn to talk. Okay. Go ahead with the next caller.
Okay, I see Frank Egger's hand is raised again. I'm not sure if it's to speak on a different topic. What is your pleasure, Madam Mayor?
Oh, he already spoke.
Okay. Then I will move on to Mark Bell. You're unmuted now, Mark.
Thanks, Michelle. As I was saying, when you have 17 items on the consent calendar and you give someone 3 minutes to address all 17 items, I think it's a violation of the Brown Act to not give people the right to be able to comment. I believe it's, was it item, the budget item, is that like 11? Am I looking at that correctly? Item number 21 in the budget, it says that the town attorney will be receiving a 99% increase in salary.
21 is not on consent. We're speaking about consent right now.
There's a budget. Adopt a resolution continuing
If you have something to
expenditures and
comment on
revenues.
items 1 through 17, you can do so.
I am. Do you have a budget item on there?
No.
Is that 19?
That's not consent.
No, I'm asking, is that 19? Is that the budget item that I'm thinking of?
That's 19, Mark, and it's been continued to the June 15th meeting.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll just go back to my other comments, which are, again, regarding the consent calendar. You have 17 items. You give people 3 minutes to comment on 17 items. How many seconds is that per item? And then you go, well, Frank Egger already spoke once, so he's done. Where is that? How is that applying the Brown Act to allowing the people to have a dialogue with their representatives? Because that's what it's for. And so I think you're totally out of line in not allowing people more time than 3 minutes when you're going to pack the consent calendar. What type of democracy is that? It's like you can just throw anything on there you want, ignore people's comments about it, and then act like they never happened and just continue. I don't think that that's how you ran. I don't remember anybody's campaign saying, oh, by the way, we're going to put all this stuff there so you don't have a chance to comment on it. So that's really all I have to say. I'll wait for 19 for the rest of my comments. And hopefully Michael McIntosh is back online, and hopefully we'll hear again from Frank. Thank you.
If I may, Mayor, reiterate, as Councilmember Kohler explained, we have continued item number 19 to the June 15th meeting.
I'm going to try, I see MTCC here again. You're unmuted. And I see that you're unmuted, but I can't hear you speaking. You might want to try turning your volume up or checking your mic connection. We can't hear you.
I think we're ready to close public comment on consent.
Okay. Besides, I don't see any more public comments.
Okay, taking it back to council. Did folks have questions or comments rather? I have a couple of comments. Councilmember Kohler.
Yeah, on item 8, which is the acquisition of the 2 parcels, I want to thank Marin Open Space Trust, especially Bill Long, Ralph Meehan, and their generous donor, and the members of the Fairfax Open Space Committee, as well as Councilmember Kachana, who's their liaison, and our town attorney, Janet Colson, for working on this important acquisition. And hopefully it will go through and the property owner won't pay the taxes at the last minute. So thank you very much, and really glad that we'll be connecting to Hawthorne Canyon.
Thank you. Councilmember Goddard.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to talk briefly on item number 12. And this is the resolution where we're approving the list of projects funded by SB1. And just, as it clearly states that the SB1 is to address the significant multimodal transportation funding shortfalls. As part of the resolution, we call out very specifically in a whereas on page 2 that the road, maintaining and preserving the local street and road system in good condition will reduce drive times, traffic congestion, improve bicycle safety, and make the pedestrian experience safer and more appealing. This goes on and on for this sort of climate mitigation impacts. And yet when we look at the graph on page 3 that actually, specifies what projects we're going to work on, there's nothing in there that calls out anything around a bike lane or repair of bike lane, striping, refreshed, sharrows, bike spine, and there's a lot of need in those particular areas that we are going to be working on. So I'm wondering if we might, it may require coming back to this, but have some kind of a policy whereby if we are approving road repair projects that have the opportunity for space for a multimodal project, that we would have that tacked on, or what that particular road treatment would be. This, just for instance, Sir Francis Drake, we're resurfacing selected sections. We have a lot of bicycle ped projects in our planning that could really or should really come alongside. So I don't know how we handle that, but as we go forward, I'm hoping we might be able to make a council decision to make sure those things are included.
I don't think Hamid is on, but I had a somewhat similar
I'm here.
dialogue via email about the project list. So I don't know if you want to respond to that, Hamid, or.
Yes, Madam Mayor. What would you like me to address?
Did you hear Renee's question?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
This is a program that was started in 2017. Exact same process, same staff report pretty much, and resolution has been before you and has been approved, and the funding that comes with this program has been received. And since it's been working, we didn't want to make any changes to the system that has been working. And but in general, a good engineering practice is whenever you pave a road, striping, bike lanes, reflectors, lane divider, those are all part of a good engineering design. You just don't pave and just walk away. So if there is room for, obviously a good surface is used by cars, trucks, buses, bicycles, wheelchairs, strollers, anybody, any wheel that uses the pavement benefits from it. It's gas or electric vehicle. It serves multimodal. But as far as creating a separate bike lane or bike lane class 1, 2, 3, depending on the size and dimensions and geography of the road, of course, there's a good engineering practice that providing striping, whatever it takes to make driving safer is something that is always or should be considered during the design.
Yeah, Hamid, thank you. I appreciate that response. I think this is a longer conversation that we would have to have off of the consent.
Sure.
But I think it's really actually a policy piece that we might be able to discuss when we bring back the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Sure.
And look at how this gets incorporated so that when we have selected sections of road, as we do in this list, we often don't look at it comprehensively in terms of how we would create complete streets with our bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So I think it warrants a longer conversation off of a consent situation that maybe the BPAC could bring back when we reform. But thank you.
You're welcome.
Has everyone offered their comments? And I have one brief one. So related to item 3, the written report from council members, Council Member Goddard and Vice Mayor Cutrona, I want to thank you for your report on the May 23rd meeting, accelerating our efforts to end homelessness in Marin County. As you probably know, there's quite a bit of feedback and questions and concerns concerning our unsheltered population in the community. And I want to encourage you to centralize everything that is being done right now from a Health and Human Services perspective, from the police department, so we can share with the community what is happening and what proposals or ideas you have in motion and ideation. We can talk about hosting a discussion on the agenda downstream. But because the Brown Act precludes me or anyone else from engaging with you on this topic, it's creating it's problematic. So like I said, I'd like to really encourage you to publish in this report going forward all the activities of the town to support our homeless population. Thank you. So with that, I think we're ready to move on to.
Do you want to have a motion?
Oh yeah, thank you. I don't know which one.
Interested in the motion. I'm just suggesting a motion.
Okay, so we didn't pull anything. We didn't.
No, I would make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the change in the resolution for 5E.
Yes.
Makes it clear that the tax rate of 0.0250 per assessed valuation is less than last year. And also for item 8, and I'm not sure how to state this, I may need the town attorney's language or what Jack Judkins mentioned, that we would make changes to the resolution to make clear that it's a tax, that they are tax default properties, not tax foreclosures. And
well, and what I said is that we'll look at it to add clarifying language to it. We're talking about the same thing, so we will definitely add clarifying language to that, though.
Okay, so that's in addition to the actual resolution, you would add another whereas, something like
no,
that.
just add clarifying language to the whereas clauses in the existing resolution.
Okay, so I would accept that friendly amendment.
I'm happy to second that.
Motion Kohler, second Cutrano. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goddard.
Aye.
Councilmember Ackerman. Yes. Councilmember Kohler,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cutrano,
Yes.
and Mayor Hellman.
Yes,
Ayes all.
thank you. Okay, moving on to the public hearings, item 18. This item is continued to July 6th, 2022. We agreed earlier this evening to continue item 19. So I believe that gets us to item number 20. Introduce an ordinance amending Town Code Title 17, Chapter 17.008, 17.052, Chapters 17.076, 17.080, 17.124, incorporating a definition of short-term rental, providing parking regulations for said short-term rental use, and including short-term rentals as permitted uses in all single-family residential zone districts, and introduce an ordinance of Town Council of the Town of Fairfax adding new Chapter 5.57 entitled Short-Term Rental Program, and adopt a resolution adopting policies and procedures for the administration of short-term rental program as set forth in the Fairfax Town Code, Chapter 5.57. This item is exempt from further review under CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15061B3 and 15301A. Janet, I believe you are delivering for staff.
Yes, this is the short-term rental item. And what we're trying to do here is legalize short-term rentals and establish a short-term rental program. We believe that short-term rentals already exist in Fairfax. And so we are adding this program in order to make those legal, bring those in. People can register their short-term rentals. And that requires that we make some changes to the zoning code. It requires that we set up a program via ordinance, and that via resolution, we have guidelines for the operation of this program. I would point out that in the definition of short-term rental in that zoning code change, I want to make one clarifying revision, and that is in the definition of short-term rental. So it says an existing single-family residence, portion of an existing single-family residence, or an accessory dwelling unit, ADU.
Janet, can you tell us where you are?
Yes, I'm in the ordinance, zoning ordinance. It's attachment A. In section 1, there's a definition for short-term rental.
Okay.
So it says short-term rental, an existing single-family residence, portion of an existing single-family residence, or an accessory dwelling unit, ADU, or junior accessory dwelling unit, JADU. And this is established prior to January 1st, 2020. So we're saying we're going to add in the language parentheses limited to ADUs/JADUs created prior to January 1st, 2020, close paren, in which overnight accommodations are provided to guests for compensation, etc. And this is a clarifying addition to make it really crystal clear that what we're talking about is short-term rentals can be ADUs or JADUs, but only if they were created or established prior to January 1st, 2020. And the reason for that is because on January 1st, 2020, that's when the new state ADU laws came into effect. And that prohibits accessory dwelling units being built or created for purposes of short-term rentals. So ADUs, JADUs can be used as short-term rentals if they existed prior to January 1st of 2020. And that's because of the state law. And so we have the changes to the zoning code that's in one ordinance. We then have another ordinance which establishes the short-term rental program. That's the new chapter 5.57. And it references the purpose and intent and list out violations and how we handle those. And then there's a resolution And the resolution is where the real meat of the program is, I think. And that's definitely.
I'm kind of confused. Can you tell us what attachment you're working on? Is that item C? I mean, you're talking pretty fast, so I'm just trying to, so the resolution.
The resolution is C.
The resolution is attachment C. The first ordinance, the zoning ordinance, is attachment A. The second ordinance, the one 5.57, is attachment B. And so attachment C is the resolution. And this is the one where the definitions are included here. It references the short-term rental registry, talks about the TOT, the definition of tourist home use. We have program requirements here, program registration. This is where the sort of meat of this program is found. And so I'm happy to try to answer questions about this. If you have questions about the zoning portion of it, I will point out that the town planner, Linda Neal, is online as well, I believe. Yes, Linda's here. And also, I think probably the person who knows most about this short-term rental program is Councilmember Kohler. So that concludes my comments.
Looks like we have a hand raised. Vice Mayor Katana.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The first, I'm just cognizant of the fact that this is a 20-page document, so I'm going to try to home in on the exact pages when I speak to them. The first question is found on page 16 of the overall document, but it's, I guess, page 7 of the second or of the last attachment. And it relates to the vegetation, like for wildland urban interface short-term rental units. I was curious, so it says the registrant must pass a vegetation inspection in a form prescribed by the program, proof of which must be completed and submitted as part of the program registration. And I also am tracking with the fact that registration is for a 1-year term. So am I correct in understanding that there would be an annual vegetation inspection? Just trying to figure out what the period is or how cyclical that is. And then I was just wondering who conducts that inspection, and it says in a form prescribed by the program, and I wasn't sure what that was referring to, but that's my first question, or my first collection of questions. Sorry.
Let me just answer, because as you know, defensible space is something you need to keep up on. I think we would require an annual inspection, and I think your question is, well placed, that this is something that should have been put in there. So where it says the registrant must pass the vegetation inspection, I think we would say annually after that, just to make it clear. And while I agree with you that, I looked at this and I thought about it as well and thought, should we specify? Well, currently, as you know, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority through Ross Valley Fire is doing vegetation inspections. So I'm not sure that we need to put that in here, but I would defer to you. Should we just specifically say inspection as conducted by Ross Valley Fire through Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, just to make it crystal clear?
Well, are you talking? I'm sorry.
I have a comment about that.
Okay.
If I may. I'm not sure that to me, it doesn't feel adequate to just require an inspection, because we all know very well that these inspections they've gotten terrific, but we haven't quite figured out how to enforce when folks don't do the required work that's been called out in their inspection. So I'm not sure that, to me, requiring an annual inspection, which they actually don't do annually. Like
They
this,
will if you request it.
well, yeah, I'm just saying that inspections are one thing, but actually a monitoring so that actually that work has been performed is another thing. And I don't know if we can incorporate that if we're going to go as far as requiring an inspection annually.
Well, we can, if I may, we can, it's to be pass an annual inspection. We can have that be one of the requirements.
I mean,
It already says pass. It already has that language in there.
oh, it does.
Well, if I can clarify, I mean, yeah, I'm not asking to like point out something that's not there. I guess I'm trying to just clarify. So is it that the program is every single year you register your Airbnb, and so there's an annual process that triggers like a veg management review and also a property inspection, like for health or CO, like I know that there's like smoke detectors and CO2. Is it just people check off a box, or what's the frequency with which short-term rentals are actually like visited, I guess, is what I'm wondering. And yeah.
I guess I would just say this. If you have to register annually, then all of that should be annual.
Got it.
And
okay.
That makes, I mean, because we don't want one year for things to be okay and the next year not to be okay, right?
I'm just trying to make sure that.
No, I think you're raising good points. I'm not being facetious. I'm just saying you're raising really good points.
Okay. And I just had two other questions. One is about the off-street parking. I know that there's designated parking based on the number of guests. And I guess I was wondering, since it sounds like there would be a contracted firm that would be like a middle person that would monitor compliance and would make reports to the town, if there is an issue with off-street parking or something as it relates to a short-term rental, just for the public that are watching this, or for my own understanding, like what's the do you reach out to the host compliance, or do you reach out to PD or the town, or like how to remedy issues as it relates to the parking? And I guess I don't know like what the turnaround time is with host compliance in general, if they're the go-between for complaints for neighbors or people in the neighborhood.
So they would have a complaint form that people would issue complaints. So it's similar to what we have in our programs now, where it's complaint-based. So they have a 24/7 complaint-based, and as part of the process, you have to designate a contact that will be available while the unit is being rented. So if they get a complaint, they would reach out to that contact. Now, is it automatically going to be fixed? Not necessarily, but they will have a complaint form and they monitor that. I'm not sure if it's 24/7 or 7 days a week.
Great, thank you for that. And then my final sort of general question is on a different page. It's on page 14 of the document, which is page 5 of that.
C.
Yeah, C, thank you. And it's under properties with multiple residential units of section, so it's section 4C1. And it says, where a lot contains a single family dwelling and any combination of the following habitable spaces, like an ADU, an additional dwelling unit, junior accessory dwelling unit, constructed and or permitted prior to January 2020, this lot may not offer as a short-term rental an entire single-family dwelling and the additional habitable space concurrently. I guess I was just wondering, does that mean that if you are a homeowner and you also have an ADU, you cannot like Airbnb all of it simultaneously? Like you would have to go stay in your ADU if you're Airbnb-ing your home, or something like, is that the case? Or it seems like a disincentive a little bit for a homeowner with an ADU if they can't leave their whole place because they have an ADU and the home. But it's not, I didn't read it clearly. Or it wasn't clear to me. You're on mute.
Barbara, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was trying to be quiet because my cat was making noise. You know, a lot of this was taken from San Rafael's program. And that's the way I read it, with the idea that you don't want to have just this entire property as Airbnb with nobody around. Now, we could potentially change that if you feel that it's a disincentive. You know, I mean, I don't think we have a huge issue with party houses here, and we don't have that many short-term rentals. And we also know from the stats that host compliance pulled for us that people aren't renting them out for a year at a time. They're, you know, all year. They're about 30 days out of a year. So Janet, do you have anything to add to that, or Linda? It may be that's just not.
That was the intent, not to have an entire property rented out if there were multiple dwelling units on that property, to have no owner or no occupant present at all and just rent the whole thing out. That is the intent, to stop that from happening.
And I think it's a good intent. People are not going to misbehave if the owner's there. You know what I'm saying? It will decrease the number of issues that arise if you leave it that way.
You can have it any way you want it, but that is the intent of the way it's written currently.
And if there's a long-term renter though in the ADU, they could leave the house, right?
Yeah.
They could Airbnb the house.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. And then the final thing is just confirming that there's no cap in this short-term rental ordinance on the number of days that a property owner would be permitted to put their house up.
There is no cap.
There is not.
And also, I think I have asked that we look to see if other jurisdictions are doing caps. I can tell you anecdotally, what I've been told is San Francisco has a huge problem with party houses and people that are buying houses just to Airbnb. And so they have some caps. I'm not that familiar with their program, but that we don't see that as being a big problem in Fairfax in particular, because host compliance data shows us that we're looking at about an average of 30 days being rented out a year. And just one quick piece of information, the mayor asked me the other day if the conditions had changed as far as the number of short-term rentals in the town, because host compliance pulled those data a few months ago when it was probably lighter. And Kester just pulled that for us. And in fact, the 75 went down to 74. So we don't have a huge amount in town. And so if that is helpful, but no, there's no cap.
And I will add that we've been doing research trying to find out what other Marin County cities have short-term rental programs. And so far we're not getting a great deal of response, but we're looking at codes. And so we found that Nevada has a 30-day cap, and that's the only one we found so far.
They have so they cap it. You can only participate for 30 days
out of the year.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's helpful. Thanks for letting me know about that. And I think those are all my questions, Mayor. But thank you so much, Councilmember Kohler, for all your work on this.
Oh, thank you. And just one thing I wanted to add, it's not that I did a big statistical analysis, but when I looked at a number of cities in Marin, there were no caps other than what Janet's talking about is Nevada. And we do have a number of jurisdictions that do have, are not prohibiting short-term rentals currently. So thank you.
Sorry, Barbara, do you mean?
Councilmember Ackerman had his hand up. You don't have your hand up anymore?
I think I got my question answered.
Okay.
Mayor,
Go ahead, Councilmember Goddard.
It's just a question of what Barbara just stated. So there are a number of jurisdictions that are not prohibiting, but are they expressly permitting?
Yeah.
Or it just hasn't been taken up.
No, in the last staff report we had we're in jurisdictions that have them, and I have a big pile of paper here, but I don't want to take time to look through it. But I think at least 7 are allowing them. And on the last chart that we had, it did not show Larkspur as allowing them, but in fact, Larkspur does allow them and is using host compliance. Everyone that is allowing them, including the county, is using host compliance to assist them. And just maybe one bit of information that you've already gleaned is that when we took this up a few years ago, when you and I were on the council, I think even before Bruce, companies like host compliance weren't around. So it's really evolved. In the old days, Airbnb was fighting. Now we're at a point where we can do this and make sure that we have some protections for people in town. We're also not driving people underground. And, you know, we have a low administrative cost of really regulating things so that, you know, we're collecting TOT, not a lot of money, but we're making things more protective. Thank you. Mayor, did you have some question?
I have comments, no questions. I'm ready to open the,
One more question, Mayor. I'm sorry. Yeah, on the last page, page 19 or page 10 of attachment C, it mentions what is it, section 7, 7B and 7C, the discussion of administrative citations and administrative penalties. We point to the code. I was just wondering, Janet or Linda, for anybody who's watching and interest, like what are the penalties, or the, like in layman's terms, of what would happen?
So the first citation for a violation, the penalty is $100. For the second one, it goes up to $200. And then if you get a third one, it's $500 per day that the violation continues after that.
Thank you so much.
that's for the violation of the.
That's for administrative penalties, period. That's in the first chapter of the town code. And so, so that's for any administrative penalty.
Okay. Councilmember Ackerman?
So yeah, I think I will ask my question. I hope it doesn't confuse things. I've always wondered with this type of a thing, whether it's kind of a different situation if one time only, not as a regular basis, if someone decides that they want to travel for a while and they like to rent their place out while they're traveling, but one time only, and maybe for longer than 30 days, is that, would that come under this, or would that?
No, this is just for under 30 days. So if you wanted to travel and go to Europe for 3 months and you want to rent your place out for 3 months, it's not covered. This is a short-term rental program.
But not covered, meaning that that could be done without violating this law.
It's a regular rental.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thanks, that's all my question was.
All right, we're ready to open public comment on this item, please.
Okay, people wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And I will start the timer. Okay. I see MTCC, you're unmuted now. And I'm not sure why we aren't able to hear you if you're speaking. It's unusual because I know you have spoken before at council meetings and
Or can he call in if something's not working with his mic? Can he get in some other way?
yeah, he could call the phone number
Yeah,
on
so
the agenda.
that's what I would suggest for people that we can't hear.
That's a good idea. Thank you, Linda. I can read the phone number. It's also posted online on our website. It's in the box at the top of the agenda. It's 1-669-900-9128. That's the phone number. And then you, when you're prompted, you would enter the Zoom webinar ID of this meeting, which is also on the agenda, 880-3100-1183. I suggest you do that. Sorry. Thank you. The next speaker is Frank Egger, and you're unmuted now.
Thank you, Michelle. Frank Egger, 13 Meadowway, Fairfax. Just before I say a few words here, you had 17 items on a consent calendar. I wanted to speak to 3 of them, but was only allowed to speak to 1. So there's really a problem with the Brown Act and your 17 item consent calendar. But anyway, let me get back to item number 20. Fairfax has way more than 75 short-term rentals. You have received past testimony of Airbnb type rentals in apartment building projects here in Fairfax. These are in our RM multiple residential zones. So the question I have is, why are you exempting RM multiple zones? That means all the apartment buildings should go Airbnb, and we're going to lose affordable housing. So the question is, you need to know how many affordable units will Fairfax lose to short-term rentals in our RM multiple zones. Both Marin County and Sonoma County are currently approving moratoriums on short-term rentals in their tourist areas. Fairfax is the gateway to West Marin, the Point Reyes National Seashore, and Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Fairfax also has become a tourist attraction because of our access to mountain bike roads. How will this ordinance impact our housing element in Fairfax? How many affordable housing units is Fairfax abandoning with such a loosely written ordinance? I urge you to continue this item. Remember, there's case law that requires short-term rental companies to identify all short-term rentals in our town. That's law. And you can go, there's at least a dozen short-term rental companies operating in Fairfax, and you can go to each one of them, ask them how many short-term rental units they have listed in Fairfax. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mallory G, and you're unmuted now.
Okay, you can hear me. I like what Frank said. I also have a question. How do you know how many people have Airbnbs if they're not hooked up to rental agencies? How do you check? How do you know this? Because I imagine there's a lot more than you're thinking as well. I also, at the moment in Stinson, they have a 2-year moratorium on this because of what's how many people are renting out their homes. And it's really changed the feel of the town to have the owners not be there. And so I just don't want this to turn into that. But I also want to know how you are vetting, how you are finding out who really is, how many people really are without an agency doing Airbnb. Anybody answer that?
We don't go back and forth. Host compliance checks 22 to 23 companies.
Right, and then there are individual.
Mallory, it's not a dialogue, it's a one-way communication forum, and this is a pattern, and I'm sorry, I know it's a challenge, but please provide your comments in the next.
So my comment is people should be vetting and trying to find out what we really have, because I'm pretty sure it's not everybody that has signed up through rental agencies.
Okay, thank you. And the only hand I see up still is MTCC. Let's see if I can hear anything. No. Okay. I'm going to lower your hand. And Mark Bell, you are unmuted now.
I didn't realize that when you spoke, you couldn't possibly have a dialogue with the town council who you elected as a populace. I mean, you can only make your comment. You can't ask a question and get a response. This is like a new definition of transparency, like, like we're up here and we can just ignore you and we can ignore your questions when you ask 8 questions or 10 questions and we don't bother to answer any of them. Well, that's just how it is. I don't think that's how it's set up. I don't recall when people had a simple question that they wanted a clarification on that they couldn't get an answer. I think you guys really need to start looking inside, because you're making stuff up as you go, and all I see is like Trump and totalitarianism. I don't see a democracy coming out of you guys. That's all I have to say.
The next speaker is Michael Branton, and you're unmuted now.
Thank you. Hi, Michael Branton, 102 Hickory Road in Fairfax. I think that last comment was very annoying, but I'm going to get past that and just say, as a homeowner, I would like to be in the position of renting out my entire home at some point, being retired. I've never done it. I've never done a short-term rental, but I would like to explore it. But if I do that, I'm not going to be living on the premises. My wife and I would move. So is that a possibility? Is that something that's anticipated? How does that work? We've owned our home for quite a number of years. Thank you.
The next speaker is PJ, and you're unmuted now.
Thank you. When I was reading through the item on the agenda list, it seems like a large motivation for adopting this program is that these short-term rentals already exist, and thus by adopting this ordinance, we are bringing into compliance units that already exist. What was not clear to me is why any units that are not currently in compliance would suddenly become in compliance if there's additional fees or inspections to be passed. And I know council members earlier spoke about the possibility of caps on the number of days rental units would be available. I'm not sure what mechanisms there are to make sure that an approved residence for a certain number of days follows that cap, except for compliance with the ordinance, at which point what mechanism for continued compliance would there be afterwards? What I'm trying to get at is, it just seems to me like we're creating permissible short-term rentals and saying if you don't have them, all of a sudden you're not in compliance with these rules. I don't understand why we couldn't just make these rules and say you can't have short-term rentals, and these are the rules for enforcing compliance, except for the fact that the hotel unit tax is funding the third-party provider that is regulating compliance, in which case it just seems like there is a competing interest for them maintaining their business with the town, and thus making sure that there are always short-term rentals, as opposed to making sure that the short-term rentals available are always in compliance.
Okay, thank you. And you try MTCC one more time. And we can't hear you. Okay, Madam Mayor, what would you like to do?
Yeah, I'm sorry this resident's having difficulty, but you already read the phone number, right? Oh,
yeah.
I do see it says total 1 phone call in listener on my screen here. So someone may be waiting phone.
If you're on the phone and you want to raise your hand, you need to press *9 on your phone. But I think that's just a phone person.
Oh, listening.
Yeah. But MTCC has lowered their hand, so.
okay, let's close the public comment. Thank you. I have a couple of questions and comments. Does anyone else? You do, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I do too.
Anyone else? Okay, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak briefly to the rental zoning area for multifamily housing. So on our leases for renting in multifamily units, it's prohibited, at least at the complex I'm at. I don't know if this is true throughout the town. It would be interesting but to answer the commenter's question, my understanding is this would just prohibit that outright, but I'm just adding that in addition to prohibiting outright, we are prohibited in our leases in participating in short-term rentals in general. So just wanted folks to understand that. And I think host compliance would capture whether or not any address was doing that. And I think property managers do monitor that, but just wanted to acknowledge that. I had a question.
Vice Mayor, can I just mention something?
Sure.
So originally we wanted to include multifamily because there are some multifamily that are doing short-term rentals. I know of at least one. And host compliance does capture it. And as I mentioned briefly, they check 22 to 23 companies. They check all the little ones as well. And so we originally wanted to include multifamily because we know it's happening. And if we just prohibit, all we're doing is driving people underground potentially. And there was a glitch when it went to the Planning Commission for zoning and it wasn't captured. So there may be an appetite to bring that back later. So it's a zoning change that's needed, and it wasn't captured when it went to the Planning Commission. So that was a mistake. We don't need to talk about it now. It may be that in the future we want to bring it back. But anyway, I hope that answers that one piece.
Thanks for clarifying that. So it'll be up to the property owner for multifamily establishments, whether or not they want to allow that.
Or if we want to take it on later and send the zoning change for multifamily to the Planning Commission and then take up just that piece separately if we proceed with this tonight.
Got it. And that's a good segue into just my overarching question, which is, as I've looked into the ways that California communities are trying to deal with this, and it sounds like Novato has a pretty conservative cap. I know Berkeley is doing no cap for your primary residence if you're living there and it's a room or 2 rooms, but if it's the whole home and you're staying somewhere else, I think there's a 150-day cap that they're talking about. I don't know what the county is considering here with their current moratorium on new short-term rentals. I know
that's only in West Marin.
Right. I know that in SoCal, they're going to such an extreme that some of the larger communities are doing not just caps on the number of days, but doing a cap on the percentage of housing that can actually participate in this. And they're doing crazy things like lottery systems. I guess I'm just wondering how we have a whereas where we're saying that we're doing this in a manner that maintains long-term rental housing stock, even though we know, aside from the actual short-term rental companies that say that this is a good thing, pretty much all like academic literature and government policies indicating that not only does this drive up rental costs, but it also drives up housing costs, and it also has negative knock-on implications for long-term rental housing stock. So I just don't know how we can square saying that in a resolution when we know empirically that's 100% not true, based on all stratified random samples and control tests for different research that's been done over the last couple of years. But that's just a high-level question. I know, Councilmember Kohler, I don't expect you to have a super strong answer to it because it's just big picture.
Well, I would say this. Remember that I haven't seen all the data. I spent a lot of time on this, but clearly you've spent some time. Remember, you're looking at things throughout the country, throughout places like Southern California where there's beaches and party houses. And we're talking about host compliance pulled 75. As I said, they run 22 to 23 companies. They look at all the little ones as well. They're trying to capture as much as they can. They didn't bring this to us. I brought this to us. And part of the reason I brought it to us is former Mayor Frank Egger brought it up a couple of years ago saying we should proceed with it. When we talk about 75 or even 100, and we talk about the data that host compliance has provided us, which is looking at roughly 30 days, the average rental. That's not people that necessarily want to rent a room in their house or rent their whole house. And so I think we're in a different situation. We're in a completely different situation than West Marin, where we know that people have bought up houses purely for short-term rentals or rentals. So the statistics that you just mentioned, I would just say, I don't think we're in the same ball game as Newport Beach or as San Francisco or Berkeley. And I think we're talking about a small segment. And when this started in 2015, it was because somebody came to us and said, I want to pay the TOT and I'm using this to stay in my home. And I think one of our speakers tonight said, he'd be interested in doing it. And yes, you can rent out your whole home, but if you haven't, under this program, but if you have an ADU or a JADU, you can't rent everything out. But if you have a whole home, you could rent it out under a short-term rental. So I don't, and this is me, I don't believe we're really removing housing stock. This is a very small segment of our stock that's out there. And so I just feel that if we put our head in the sand and say we don't want to do this, and we feel like we're going to force people to rent out these rooms for affordable housing, instead they're going to stay underground and they're going to do this without any oversight by us. So that's why I brought it. And I don't think it's a big moneymaker for the town. It's also just the estimate of utility users tax would pay for host compliance, whose average, I think they talked about charging us $14,000 a year for an incredible amount of services, and we would still have money on top of that. I'm not doing this as a moneymaker. I'm doing this so that we can regulate something that's already happening. So I'm sorry, that was long-winded.
No, I appreciate that. And I don't know. It's still unclear to me, like even the person that did call in that expressed interest expressed it to say that they would probably move and would just rent this out. So it would just remove a house from the long-term like rental stock. So that's in opposition to the resolution that's before us, just as an anecdote. So I guess I don't know the full implications. I'm willing to trust you on testing out what we have before us here, because so much work has gone into it. But I am really sensitive to this fact, because all of the research that is out there, not just for big cities, but for small cities as well and small towns, indicates that it will have negative implications for long-term rental housing stock, which I think is the opposite of what we are saying we intend to do in this resolution that is before us. So that is all I want to put on the record, so that everybody here is aware of that. So thanks.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, I thank you, Chance, for stating that very clearly. That has always been my interest in getting into this item. And I remember when it was first brought up on council before my time on council. And it's been a while that we've batted about getting to this. I'm glad we are. I think we should probably proceed with it. But I would like to be clear that we should monitor what we learn as we do it, whether the number of short-term rentals that host compliance sees goes up or down or changes in any way. We need to get back to the question, if we care to, about short-term rentals out of multifamily housing. As I understand it, the way it's written right now, that would just be illegal. I think the person, if we all understood them correctly, the person who commented tonight and said that they might consider moving out of their house completely and turning it into a short-term rental all the time, that would be illegal also under the current, what we're considering tonight, because that would mean that would no longer be their primary residence. So you can't just leave indefinitely and then still do a short-term rental, because you can only do it from your primary residence. So that would also be prohibited. So there are a lot of, I support what we've got before us tonight, and I really thank Councilmember Kohler and Janet and all the other people who have worked very hard on this. But I think we're kind of guessing as to what the actual effect would be. And I'll second what Chance says, that the important effect to me is that we not diminish our actual housing stock for people who want to live for a long term, particularly rental stock. So we just don't know what the effect will be. We can take guesses. I think we're trying to do the right thing, but let's monitor it and let's really be willing to come back. In fact, I think we should probably plan on coming back to it after a certain amount of time and just looking at what we've got and deciding whether we need to do anything else.
Thank you. Renee?
Thanks, everyone. I am going to be a voice of dissent with full appreciation for all that's gone into it and very cognizant of the process over many years to try and, in grappling with this. I want to just call attention to the very second page of the staff report under discussion. There's an assumption, and I think Chance actually spoke to this in one of the whereases, where it says there are benefits to establishing a short-term rental program by regulating the conversion and the use of residential units to tourist and transient use. The town can minimize any potential adverse impacts on housing supply and on households of all income levels. And I believe that to be an assumption, which I respectfully disagree with. In looking, and I did some of the same research that Chance is referring to in terms of the short and long-term effects and the decrease in long-term rental supply, especially on the affordable income level. Really, where the sticking point is for me is in the ADUs, in that we have worked so hard, and Barbara more than anyone knows this, to make sure that we can bring in and incentivize and waive permitting fees, almost to grandfathering in ADUs. Staff has spent copious amounts of time. We even have sort of a guidance education program for people interested in creating an ADU. And I feel as though by including ADUs as a potential source of short-term rental stock, we are we may be meeting a RENA requirement, but we are certainly not housing more people in affordable units. To me, 75 to 100 units, and we don't know exactly, although I trust what host compliance has provided for us, is significant. I know 75 people. I don't know 75 people, but I know at least 10 who would have given their eye teeth to live in an ADU. And that amount of loss, potential long-term housing stock feels significant to me. It's interesting because all through this meeting, I've had sirens going up and down my road. I'm on Cascade Drive. So when I really prepared for this meeting, I was looking at all the parking stuff. And I was looking and thinking about my Firewise experience, which is that we have neighborhoods, roads where we've talked about delineating spaces for parking, but that's a problem because residents can't even fit their own, allowable number of cars in those spaces. People don't have off-street parking for the most part. No one uses their garages. And we have narrow roads, and we all know the evacuation dangers. We put a lot into roadside clearance and defensible space, but we do have a problem. So when I look at the numbers and all of the requirements around parking, I'm thinking, wow, who is actually going to monitor and then enforce by either warning or citation or education or whatever it might be that needs to take place when we have a third-party consultant like host compliance, who may be the best there is? Who are the eyeballs on the ground? And what do we do when neighbors are fighting over the fact that, I'm sorry, it doesn't, I think it says in here, 4 people equate to 1 car. I'm not sure I really understood that, but multiple cars, especially if you have a place with multiple habitable, potential short-term units, and all of these requirements, I just don't see it. And it worries me that the amount of time it would take for our staff. I don't know who patrols this. I don't know what happens when people park outside the lines. We don't have lines anywhere because people argue about whether they should exist. I just don't believe that it's worth what it is that we would be encouraging. just already very impacted roads with very little enforcement. That's a primary concern, along with the loss of stock. I look at the cost, and if the average is 30 days that people are renting it, and if we're talking about assisting people who are using this to supplement their income to stay in their homes, the max that they would actually be able to make if we were talking on that 30-day average is $4,500 per year. And so I'm just not sure that what will go into permitting and monitoring and enforcing this would, to me, be more cost than actually monitoring to prohibit. So I know we have people out there and we're trying to get ahead of something that already exists and is, but I'm not sure that I would vote for this on that premise.
Sorry, Renee, how did you come up with the 4,500?
Well, I just looked at 30 days and then I times that by 150, which is what they said was the average per night that people would get, might get here in Fairfax. And that gives, if people were going at 30 days per year, unless I'm off here, it was $4,500 per year.
Got it.
It's much less than they would earn with a long-term rental, and we sacrifice 75 or however many we have. So this is tough, but everything I've read really leads to this idea that we really are reducing our low-income housing stock. So I'm not able to support it at this time. I do, respect the work. Honestly, I know how much you put in. I would say, having spoken my piece, that if we should choose to go forward with this and the council votes that way, that we consider strongly that any of the permitting fees that don't go to the third-party consultant would go into an affordable housing trust, a housing trust that we've discussed for years that has not been formed. And that go to fund either a trust or some form of rent control associated function. So I want to put that on the record that should my opinion not gain any traction, that would be something to be considered by everyone.
I just think one of the things, the fees, registration fees, can only be based on what it would cost us to run a program. As you know, a few years ago when we did a fee study. So I think that's not a bad idea, but I think that should be a separate discussion about whether or not we form a housing trust. And I think part of what we've talked about over time is having inclusionary zoning. And I think that's a different discussion, respectfully. But anyway, just want to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just appreciate everybody's contribution. I agree with a lot of what's been shared. First, I want to say thank you to Councilmember Kohler for doing so much heavy lifting on this. And, I actually coincidentally got a call last week from a friend who has a unit, and she was like, I'm trying to figure out how to apply for a permit. I want to do a short-term rental. I said, we don't have a program. So I know several people, this is an existing phenomenon, right? I think we've established that, we know that. I have several friends with units. It's a very different experience as a homeowner renting your property for a short-term versus renting for a long-term. It's apples and oranges. And I totally appreciate the data that you're raising and the studies, Chance, and I absolutely think we will be monitoring, right? We saw the monthly reporting they're going to be providing, and I would like to take it back in 6 months, take a look how it's going. I know all of us are very committed to supporting affordable housing, and I just think it makes a lot of sense to regulate this and gain a little bit of modest revenue from it, as are so many jurisdictions in the county. So with that, Is anyone ready to make a motion?
I just have one more question. I'm sorry. And I totally hear you, Stephanie, Mayor Hellman, I'm sorry. But coming from the renter side of things, I know plenty of renters that are also having the hardest time finding a place to live and stay in Fairfax. And now they're moving to San Anselmo, and they've been at council meetings, and they will no longer be at our council meetings. So I just really want to reiterate that and just throw out there this wonder about, and maybe this is to Councilmember Kohler, if Novato has a cap, why did we decide to forego a cap and just allow 365? You could just Airbnb your place.
Because a couple of things. I looked at other programs in other Marin jurisdictions, and nobody has a cap other than Novato. And I didn't do extensive, but I reached out to a lot of jurisdictions. And also, when we see right now that the average is 30 days a month, what is the need there? I just don't think we have the problem. We will be getting monitoring reports monthly from host compliance. We can certainly reevaluate. I would rather we reevaluate a little later than 6 months, because the first idea is to get people to register and start doing things legally. I'd rather we wait a little bit longer, but we will be seeing where it's at. Let's assume it goes crazy and we start having a lot of people doing this. I don't really think it will, but that's me. We could always get rid of the program, or we could always install a cap. I don't see the need right now. So that's just the answer to your question. And one of the things, I was listening to your first comment where you had a concern about one of the whereases that talked about the third whereas, which talks about, while assuring that their existence is regulated in a manner that allows the town to maintain its long-term housing stock in Fairfax. I believe that's true, but if that's a concern, I would change that to say, while assuring that their existence is regulated in a safe and effective manner, period, and not have the long-term housing stock if you feel that that's a concern to you. So with that, I could make a motion if we're ready for that. So I'll go ahead and make the motion. So I'm going to do it. Janet, shall I do all three together with the changes? Town attorney, Janet.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just trying to find the right buttons. That's all.
Okay, well, all right. So
they're a package deal, and so I would do them. They can't go in really individually. They can't exist by themselves.
Well, let me go ahead then. Introduce, waive first reading, and read by title only an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax amending Town Code Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.008 definitions, 17.052 off-street parking and loading requirements, Chapter 17.06 parentheses RS-7.5 single-family residential zone medium density, 17.08 parentheses RS-6 single-family residential zone high density, 17.124 parentheses UR upland residential zone, incorporating a definition of short-term rental, providing parking regulations for said short-term rental use, and including short-term rentals as permitted uses in all single-family residential zone districts. And with the change to the third whereas that would say, while assuring that their existence is regulated in a safe and effective manner, semicolon, strike the rest, and also the change to the definition of short-term rental, which for ADUs, JADUs says limited to ADUs/JADUs created prior to January 1st, 2020, and parentheses. And then next, introduce an ordinance of Town Council of the Town of Fairfax adding Chapter 5.57 entitled Short-Term Rental Program, and adopt a resolution adopting policies and procedures for the administration of the short-term rental program as set forth in Fairfax Town Code Chapter 5.57. Did anyone want to second that?
I'll second it. Michelle, you want to take a roll call vote?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Ackerman,
Yes, with the understanding that we're going to come back and take a good look at how this works.
Councilmember Goddard,
No.
Councilmember Kohler,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cutrano,
Yes, with the same understanding as Councilmember Ackerman.
and Mayor Hellman.
Yes, with the similar understanding that we will be monitoring and coming back. Thank
The
you.
motion passes 4 ayes and 1 nay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Barbara.
As a reminder, we continued item number 21, so we will move on to the regular agenda, which there is one item, number 22, introduced by title only, an ordinance regulating the use of gasoline-powered landscape equipment. This item is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15061. I believe our climate action coordinator, Sean Yura, will be offering the staff report.
Yes, good evening. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes, thanks for sticking with us.
No problem. Good evening, council members, Mayor Hillman and Vice Mayor Cutrano. Let me have a short presentation to share with you. So hopefully I don't experience any issues this time. Okay, can you all see that all right?
Yes.
Yep, awesome. So tonight we're introducing an ordinance to regulate the use of gas-fired landscape equipment, and I'd like to cover the key elements of the ordinance and overall implementation program. And just as quick background, so at the April 6th council meeting, council directed staff to move forward with drafting an ordinance to prohibit the use of gas-fired landscape equipment and research whether a phase out of certain equipment is required due to a lack of electric alternatives or due to technical feasibility or cost effectiveness concerns. Additionally, council requested that research be conducted to determine how a trade-in of gas-powered equipment and a rebate program for electric equipment should be administered for the proposed ordinance. And before getting into the details of this, I want to reemphasize that electrifying landscape equipment is an important part of the town's climate action plan. Specifically calls for adopting an ordinance to phase out use of all fossil fuel landscape equipment and seeking financial incentives and technical assistance to support residents in making the transition to non-fossil fuel landscape equipment. Electrifying landscape equipment will also help reduce toxic air pollutants and excessive noise that landscapers and residents are exposed to on a daily basis, and thus can improve public health and reduce associated healthcare costs. So based on extensive research and target outreach with local landscapers, staff recommends that all gas-powered landscape equipment be included within the scope of the ordinance without a phased approach. However, it's recommended that some exemptions be provided for emergency use situations, chainsaws longer than 18 inches for large tree work, and if no commercially available or cost-effective electric model exists for the equipment type. In the case of a lack of commercially available or cost-effective electric landscape equipment, temporary exemptions could be approved by the town manager or designee. Speaking with Augie Venetia, one of the employee owners of Fairfax Lumber and Hardware, the cordless battery-operated equipment can be more powerful and user-friendly than gas-powered equipment while also being quieter than gas-powered equipment. Several online reviews and testimonials validate these assertions that electric landscape equipment can perform just as well, if not better, than gas-powered equipment for both commercial and residential use. Based on discussions with local landscapers, most of the time they're already using electric landscape equipment unless there isn't a comparable electric model on the market or for particular situations, such as landscaping in large remote areas or hilly areas where there are concerns over battery life. To address this latter concern, landscapers often have to carry several extra batteries to ensure the electric equipment lasts long enough to complete the job. In addition, the costs of the cordless battery-operated equipment are comparable to gas-powered models and are less expensive in some cases, especially when fuel and maintenance costs associated with gas-powered equipment are factored in over the lifetime of the equipment. That's also not to mention the healthcare cost savings from the reduction in hazardous air pollutants that have been documented to cause lymphomas, leukemias, and other types of cancer. Public Works staff is already actively replacing gas-powered equipment with electric models. And to replace the remaining town-owned gas-powered landscape equipment, staff recommends budgeting $27,000 for fiscal year 2022 and 23. For the trade-in and rebate part of this program, staff recommends setting up a trade-in of gas-powered landscape equipment and rebate program for purchasing new electric landscape equipment to be modeled similarly to how San Somo set up their trade-in rebate program for gas-powered leaf blowers with some modifications. Specifically, rather than have residents and landscapers bring their gas-powered landscape equipment to the town, they would instead bring the equipment drained of any fluids to Fairfax Lumber and Hardware, where a dumpster would be provided by Marin Sanitary. Marin Sanitary would then collect and properly recycle the equipment. This would avoid extra staff time and administrative oversight in the trade-in part of the program. Once the gas-powered equipment has been traded in, the resident or landscaper could bring their complete rebate application to Fairfax Lumber and Hardware to receive a discount on the purchase of the equivalent electric equipment. The rationale for varying discounts for residents and landscapers, as well as for different types of equipment, is based on equity and frequency of usage considerations. Since commercial landscapers would be most directly impacted by the ordinance and are often low-income workers, offering a higher discount for commercial landscapers will make this transition to electric landscape equipment more affordable for them. The rebate amount would be in addition to the $30 million that would be available to landscaping businesses through the California Air Resources Board's Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Project. The different discount percentages based on equipment type ensures that more of the rebate money goes towards equipment that is most used by residents and landscapers. The local landscapers who were contacted were supportive of the idea of this trade-in rebate program and said they would take advantage of it if it was made available. Staff recommends that $10,000 be budgeted for fiscal year 2022-23 for the rebate program. Based on a recommendation from the town attorney, the trade-in and rebate program will be covered under a forthcoming resolution that would be presented at the next council meeting in July, along with the final version of the ordinance for adoption. Therefore, the trade-in and rebate program has not been included in the draft ordinance. And finally, for enforcement and education, the Climate Action Committee and staff recommend that the ordinance not be enforced until January 1st, 2023 for residents and January 1st, 2025 for commercial landscapers, to allow for sufficient time to educate the community about the ordinance and ensure compliance. In addition, this will allow time for commercial landscapers to take advantage of the CARB funding that should be available in late summer or fall of this year. The January 1st, 2023 compliance date would also apply to town staff using gas-powered landscape equipment. Staff recommends complaints regarding violations of the ordinance be taken via the town's website Warning letters would be sent out to the property owner in charge of the landscaping work for a 6-month period following the initial enforcement of the ordinance. After the 6-month period, either a fine in the amount of $100 would be issued to the property owner for violation of the ordinance, or the fine could be avoided by taking a short online class that would be administered by staff. Although not specifically mentioned in the staff report, staff recommends also allowing the property owner to provide proof that their gas-powered landscape equipment has been traded in for electric equipment in lieu of taking the class or paying the $100 fine. The class would cover the environmental and health impacts of gas-powered landscape equipment, the availability and ease of use of electric landscape equipment, and details of the ordinance. However, for a subsequent violation after taking the class, the $100 fine would be imposed. Escalating fines for subsequent violations are recommended in $100 increments, not to exceed $500. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Goddard.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, so much. This is excellent. I love how you incorporated all the feedback. And I just had a couple questions. In terms of exemptions, is there an exemption clause in the ordinance?
Whose microphone is that? It's really bad. Can we all mute ourselves?
Oh, I didn't hear anything. Can you guys hear me?
I believe it was Councilmember Goddard's papers are right next to the microphone when you move them, so it's giving us a little noise.
Sorry.
Sorry.
So my question was exemption clause. Is there somewhere? I thought I had seen one, but I'm not finding it.
Yeah, it's let me see if I can find it in here. So there, I think. Okay, it's under, so section 874050, so scope and limitations of chapter. And so it talks about the chainsaw length. It talks about the lack of commercially available or cost comparable electric landscape equipment, and about the temporary exemptions. And it talks about emergency use situations in there.
Okay, so when it says a department, agency, or contractor of the federal government, it might, I'll just get to my question. Because let's say there's a large scale fire mitigation project. Is that an exemption? How does the exemption process work? So if someone has a hardship or they feel they meet one of these criteria, do they come to town to apply for an exemption, or how does that work? Because there's been some real concern expressed from certain members of the community who've sent lots of information, at least through my email box, just more concerned than anything about fire. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that. Will this hinder any larger scale projects where it's deemed necessary that they have a gas powered thing because of, whatever reason it might be?
So the town attorney actually include this part A of that section. I think it's actually important to include based on what you're saying, that essentially we don't want to interfere with Ross Valley Fire or PG&E to be able to do their necessary vegetation work for wildfire prevention.
I think we can share with PG&E. Sorry.
I know there's some hate out there about PG&E, but the wildfire prevention I think is important, and it's not, I don't know if we call it emergency use situation, but it is an important preventive measure, and important for climate adaptation as well. So I think that's the kind of rationale for including or kind of exempting some of those entities. I did reach out. Unfortunately, I didn't hear back, but I did reach out to Chief Yeager at Ross Valley Fire, because I was just curious if they are already using some of this electric equipment. But I think the idea with including these within or outside the scope of requiring electric equipment for certain local public entities would be for that type of like vegetation work, that they can't do that work, because of this ordinance or something like that. If that
speak to
answers
that.
your question.
I can answer that question for you if you'd like.
That would be great.
Thank you. Let me lower my hand, and then I'm going to go to look at it. 8.74050. This does not apply to the federal government, state of California, another local public entity or its contractor, the town or its employees, agents, or contractors in emergency situations. And the reason for having those exemptions is we have no jurisdiction over the federal government, the state of California, other public entities, and we wanted to be sure to exempt our own contractors in emergency situations. And so that's the reason for including it. We don't have to include it. It just is what it is already. We have no jurisdiction over the federal government. They would not be subject to our ordinances. Same with the state of California, same with another local public entity.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up, what's the process if someone does meet a criteria or whereby they feel there's a hardship or they can't get the equipment, they can't afford it, whatever it might be, what's the process for people?
So the plan is to develop a whole web page on the town website, similar to what Sansomo has for their leaf blower program. And so it has the ordinance, it has the times of enforcement, how to apply for the rebate. And in this case, it would also include information on how to apply for a temporary exemption. But basically that would go to either Heather or myself, and we would develop a process where we would, evaluate whatever paperwork they submit to us that might show, that, for example, they went to a lot of suppliers and found that this particular, maybe it's a very specialized type of equipment. There's just not electric model available. So we would evaluate that paperwork that's submitted, and we provide guidelines on what we're looking for. And I kind of talk about that, I think, in the staff report. Cost comparisons, and for example, for if they're claiming that it's not cost effective or they can't find a cost comparable electric model, and then we would make a determination of whether to approve that temporary exemption.
Okay, thank you so much.
Go ahead, Councilmember Kohler.
Yeah, Sean, thank you. Good work. So a question about the January 1st, 2023 for residential. Can you tell me how that was developed?
That is based initially on the recommendation of the Climate Action Committee. I think it makes sense to provide a little bit more time for landscapers to get into compliance with this.
I'm not asking about the landscapers. I'm asking about the residents. And the reason I'm asking is there's a lot of folks who have collected a lot of equipment over the years. And I think this is a great program, but I'm concerned that by the time the ordinance went in effect, it would be less than 6 months. And I think people are busy trying to clear the sensible space. So I just wanted to ask, rather than just a recommendation on the Climate Action Committee, did you do any research on looking at what makes sense to give people more time so that they can, even with the rebate, changing a lot of their equipment would be sort of a cost. So did you do any research based on what makes sense to give people time?
Yeah, I mean, for San Anselmo's leaf blower, gas leaf blower ordinance, which granted doesn't, cover as much equipment.
Right.
They, I think I forget exactly when that was adopted. I think it was, kind of towards the end of 2021. And then their compliance date was, January 1st, 2022. And similar, they started with a 6-month period for warning letters, and then, the fines for enforcement. I feel like 6 months is at least enough time to do the education, get the, rebate program going and all that set up. But I definitely understand if you or any of the council members feels like that initial compliance stage should
Okay, well,
be
I'll
changed.
raise that later. I mean, I just think San Anselmo just did leaf blower. And so I'll give my comments later, but I just wanted to hear about where you'd come up with that, because I think we have to do some work as well. Okay, thank you very much for all the good work.
I'll save my comments till later. Are we ready to open the public comment, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I will get the timer. Okay, it looks like we have a few public comments, starting with MTCC. You're unmuted. And we can't hear you. It seems that your microphone is not picking up your voice. It's not, pulsing the way it does when it does pick up someone's voice. So I, again, encourage you to check your connection on your computer or your phone or whatever. The next speaker is a telephone caller, and you're the only telephone caller. So if you're on the phone, I am unmuting you now. You might have to push *6 to unmute yourself on the phone. There, I see you.
Hi, Michelle, can you hear this?
Yes.
Oh, good. This is Michael McIntosh. Yeah, I've gone through all my settings and I am definitely having a difficult time tonight on the computer. Sadly, there were quite a few comments I wanted to add this evening. On the current item, you might have a compliance coming up in 6 months. And I realize I'd be probably considered commercial and not just as a residence or residential. But to maintain the maintenance that people do, I have a ride-on mower, I have a leaf blower, pole saws, chainsaws of different sizes for maintaining all the work and all the fire mitigation. And even currently, I have a great big tractor with a pull-behind mower that's been broken for over a week in the middle of the meadow because some of the grass is so thick, it's broken this tractor and gone through a couple of mowing devices. So until we get another one down from, I guess it's Placerville, my point is this would be an extreme expense that would be incurred on anybody else as myself to be trading in my ride-on mowers, my push mowers, my leaf blower, my pole saw. And this is just to safely maintain the property for fire. So I do hope there can be some considerations. And since we've brought up San Anselmo so many times, they decided to go ahead and implement such a program with one piece of equipment at a time. So possibly we could go to that model and slow this down because this is expensive. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jody Timms, and you're unmuted now.
Good evening, council members and Mayor. And thank you very much, Sean and Janet, for your support and help around this ordinance. I want to just mention, as chair of the Climate Action Committee, that we originally had proposed this ordinance at the end of last year and had an April 2022 start date, which was a little more than 6 months. So personally, having it go this far, I'm comfortable with January 2024 for residents, especially given the 6-month warning letters and also potential exemptions. As a member of the public, I now want to just speak about the for professional landscapers. I would actually encourage the council to move it up to January of 2024 for professional or commercial landscapers, which is 18 months, which seems much more reasonable than 2.5 years from now that we need to do that. I know we're all really well aware of the problems that we have globally and locally because of greenhouse gas emissions. We have to move more quickly on these issues and items, and not only the emissions, but the health issues and the noise concerns that are related to landscape equipment. I just think we've all been dragging our feet for quite a long time. So given that there are temporary exemptions, if there's not equipment available, I think that we will have a process in place where people can apply for that. And there's large rebates for professional landscapers. So again, as a member of the public, I would encourage you to consider moving the date earlier for professional landscape. And I think that for residents, the 6 months, also given the warning letters, is ample time. So I really appreciate very much your attention and your work and support on this ordinance. So thanks very much.
Mayor, could I just ask for clarification? I heard Jody say
Yeah,
January 2024.
Yeah, she mentioned, well, she clarified with her 6-month statement. I think, Jody, I think you meant to say January 2023 for residents and 24 for commercial. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to just leave what you have for residential, which is
Right.
January 2023, and move the 2025 for professional landscapers to 2024, especially given also the $30 million CARB rebates that are going to begin to be available this year. Seems like landscapers could be getting educated and have plenty of time to move forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Todd G, and you're unmuted now. You might have to unmute yourself.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Good evening, Mayor Hellman and council members. Thank you all for your service for the town of Fairfax. I'm here this evening speaking to you out of grave concern for what I believe is very, very poorly considered legislation that's being proposed here. Anyone who votes for this is endangering Fairfax, because the whole process of changing over to electric is not sufficiently thought out. And I've now written 6 different emails that Mayor Hellman and Councilman Goddard have received. And now, as of today, all the other council members. I would like each of those emails to be entered into the record and it to be a matter of public discourse and available to everybody what my concerns are. If you mandate a ban, as is being proposed, in short order, the cost of transitioning to these lesser capacity tools that can't work all day long, even with the exemption that you're talking about for specialty crews, the exemption's too late when it's an emergency. I'm sorry. If you want to actually have areas cleared, you need to have tools available to people. That transition takes time, not 6 months, not a year, not a year and a half. That transition is going to take time unless you provide the funding to people. And I've provided today an example after having met with Augie, who is cited in the staff report, that for me to replace the tools that I have, it would cost $2,500. Okay, $2,500 that I don't have today, and I can't easily pull out of a hat. The rebates that are being proposed, depending on whether I was considered a resident or a contractor, are very, very limited. I would get 8% as a resident. I've provided an email which details this. I would be capped out at $680 as a landscape contractor. That means, guess what? I am not going to have the tools to help other people or myself clear land or eucalyptus trees or brush that needs to be cleared. There are a lot of other reasons I've given too in these emails, but primarily, guess what? When the emergency happens, it's too late. Guess what? Just because there is a big effort under fire prevention to clear a swath of Marin, that doesn't clear the homes that are nearby and the neighbors that have flammable materials. I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but just recently there were 3 homes that got lit up and 8 people were displaced nearby in Oakley in Contra Costa County when there was a barbecue fire, when somebody walked away from their barbecue. Now, I'm not saying that was flammable, but I'm saying immediately removing the ability, or in short order, removing the ability for people to have tools ready at hand that they need to do this necessary work is a bad, bad, bad idea. So my primary concern is safety, that this isn't adequately thought out. My next point out is that the staff report says that some landscape contractors would need 5 or 6 batteries. Well, the town has budgeted $27,000 for what was a 4-person maintenance crew that's now a 3-person maintenance crew. What do you think it's actually going to cost all these other landscape contractors? Let's say it cost them half that. You think they can really afford that? And when there's a $680 maximum that's being proposed in the rebate program, somebody just hasn't thought this out. Connect the dots. Now, there's safety issues, there's technological issues where the batteries don't last more than 2 or 3
Todd,
years.
you're out of
That's so bad.
time. I'm sorry. Thank you for your comments.
Certainly. Also, I want to comment, one last comment, that Augie also has concerns, and his.
Well, Augie can call in with his concerns. Thank you, Todd.
Okay, the next speaker is Frank Egger. And you're unmuted now.
Thank you, Michelle. Councilmember Goddard mentioned hearing sirens a while ago. If you're not aware of it, there was an all-out countywide response to Belize Road above Fairfax. Engines came from Cal Fire, from Marin County Fire, from Ross Valley, from San Rafael. There was a structure fire close to the Meadow Club. And because of the wind on the mountain, they just called out, they called for full response. So that's the sirens that Councilmember Goddard heard. On this item, 7,500 residents live in Fairfax and approximately 3,600 living units. Fairfax is covering local landscapers with the ordinance, but how about the homeowners who do their own work? How much will it cost Fairfax property owners to convert their chainsaws, their blowers, their mowers, and their weed eaters to battery powered? I urge you to first notify all Fairfax property owners by mail of the proposed ordinance and allow them to comment on the ordinance. You have it on an agenda, but folks in town have no clue how it's going to impact them. And I just urge you to do a much greater townwide notification, and mail is the one way to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see no more new hands? Madam Mayor. Oh, yes, I do. Mark Bell, you are unmuted now.
Generally, I'm in total agreement with this issue of replacing gas-powered blowers, et cetera, with electric ones. I've seen too many people with a gas leaf blower aiming at a wet leaf for 20 minutes, trying to get it to move, and they could have just bent over and picked it up. Just the other thing that came to mind is that, you know, with the rolling blackouts that are going on, is there some way that the town or people can, you know, have some type of backup system in case, you know, we're out of power for 3 or 4 days and they haven't charged their batteries? I mean, it might be something to consider putting into the ordinance, you know, to allow, you know, use maybe during a rolling blackout. But otherwise, I'm in agreement with this. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Mallory G. And you are unmuted now.
Okay, hi. I am in agreement with changing the person who does my the maintenance for my land. Switched to battery. I actually had to make him and everybody else I see who usually are all Latino people. They don't wear masks. So now I you know, I go around vigilantly telling everybody I see who's not wearing a mask if my neighbors are having their event to do this. And the fumes are so toxic. And, you know, I don't want another short vision reason not to deal with climate change. And maybe you could set up a grant for people who need a loan for them to start to switch their equipment over and you know, help people out who need that. But I am very much in favor of having battery charged equipment rather than all this gas stuff. It is so toxic to be around. I have to leave my dog inside for, you know, a few hours till everything clears out. And the people who are using it, they don't, you know, some of them don't know how really dangerous this is. And I just think not to be short-sighted and try to save money that's going to end up being harmful for everybody. That's it. Thank you.
I do not see any more new raised hands, Madam Mayor.
Okay. I see Councilmember Kohler has her hand up. Go ahead.
Well, in general, I'm supportive of this. I think Sean did a really good job looking at all the various types of equipment and seeing what's available. I do have a lot of concerns about the deadlines. I think this is quite expensive for a homeowner who has a lot of equipment. And I think we have work to do. If we move forward on this ordinance tonight and allow the second reading and then allow 30 days, we're looking at early August for it taking effect. There's a lot of work that needs to be done by town staff, and to expect people to have all their stuff changed over by January 1st, 2023, I believe is unrealistic. And I think it's also can be cost prohibitive on the folks who have been, you know, have this kind of equipment for a number of years. I also, having worked at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, a $30 million program coming from CARB, which will go to the air districts to distribute through their grant programs. They will be wiped out in a day or two. That's not a lot of money, even though it sounds like a huge amount of money. So the grants will come and go. I would also advocate for giving more of an extension. You know, Jody Sparks mentioned that, or I'm sorry, I'm thinking of a different Jody. Jody Timms mentioned that there's an exemption process. There isn't a temporary exemption process to give people or extension process. What there is, if you say there's nothing commercially available, you can provide documentation. So I'm an advocate for extending the deadlines longer, but also having an extension process for people. Let's say a homeowner has 5 different pieces of equipment. They're probably not going to want to change all those out, and it does add up. Michael McIntosh mentioned that. Frank mentioned the number of people that probably have a lot of equipment at their homes. So I would also advocate for some type of extension for people that just allows an extension rather than, and it would be the same thing, the town manager designee, because I think we're looking at a lot of equipment. As far as I know, nobody has done all equipment in Marin. They've looked at leaf blowers and phasing in. So I think we're looking at a huge swath. But I do want to commend Sean on all his research. And I'm hopeful that we can also think about, you know, what it will take for folks to change out. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilmember Ackerman. You're on mute.
I think the Vice Mayor had his hand up for me.
Go for it. Go for it.
I meant
Yeah.
nothing by it. I'm starting to
Okay.
fade here. Let's keep
Well,
it moving.
Yeah, I generally support this, not surprisingly, because we've discussed it on the Climate Action Committee. And I realize that it seems accelerated, but I think, as Jody said, that's the situation. We need to accelerate quite a bit in how we deal with these issues. In this case, both a health issue and a climate issue, and also an equity issue, because the people who are being exposed all day long to these fumes are there's an equity issue there. So yeah, I think I would come down on just what's written in the ordinance right now as far as the dates for it coming into effect. And I like the idea of the 6 months. It's essentially really 6 months later, because there would be the first 6 months after January 1st that it would be warning letters only. And so that continues to be an opportunity for education. And part of that education specifically would be just a tip. It's probably obvious to anybody who works with these kinds of tools, but give some good thought to what brand you're going to pick, because you sort of become loyal to that brand, because the batteries are all interchangeable, the chargers are interchangeable. So, you know, don't just go buy one because it's on sale, but think about which brand you want to go with, because that's going to be what all your tools are. People can also maybe share tools with their neighbors. I mean, that is a way to lower cost. As a homeowner, I just borrowed a fairly expensive tool last week from my neighbor, and I've borrowed that same tool in the past, and he borrows tools from me too. So we can do that. We can reach across the fence and save a lot of money and a lot of resources and a lot of things that will eventually break or become obsolete. So anyway, I'm in support of the ordinance, and thank you, Sean, for your work on it.
Thank you, Bruce. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I too wanted to express my thanks to Sean. I thought it was a pretty stellar staff report. Very clear. I love the chart with the different rebate percentages and the breakdowns and the comparables and stuff like that. And also thanks to Mayor Hellman and Councilmember Ackerman, the CAC, and Jody for calling in too. I know it's just a long time coming, and I'm sure some of you have read this book, but there's this book by Dr. Saul Griffith called Electrify. And not to make everything sound like it's the most pressing thing, but like, we're talking about the fate of the planet here. And it's, even if we made perfect decisions from here on out, it still wouldn't account for things like the current cars that we have or the current landscaping equipment that we have, which I think it's what's called committed emissions. And so the book pretty much says, not only do we have to replace 1 billion machines or 1 million machines per week for the next 20 years if we're going to get this right, but it's up to us here on council to align the incentives to actually speed up the conversion of those committed emissions if we're going to have any chance at keeping emissions below 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, which will already still have plenty of negative implications. But for that reason, I'm definitely okay with the deadlines. I get that it's a crunch. I don't think that delaying this type of stuff is going to make wildfire mitigation any better. Climate impacts are going to create even more catastrophic impacts on the ground here in Marin. So I think we should keep the residential the way it is. I'm totally with Jody for moving up the commercial. And yeah, thanks again. And that's sort of where my thinking is right now.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Go ahead, Renee. Councilmember Goddard.
Yeah, no, again, thanks to everyone for all the work on this. I am in support of it as written, although moving the deadline up for commercial does make sense to me as well. That's 2024, right? So that's a year and a half to, I very much like what Mr. Egger suggested, which is that we do send a notification by mail. I do agree that there will be people that might receive a warning letter having had no idea that this even happened. And I also just want to say that, often we have a lot of things in our garages or in our backyards or stored under a storage place that we don't actually need anymore. So we may have 5 pieces of equipment that we would much better be served with only having one that might be multifunctional. So I would encourage that we actually clear out a little bit, because having sort of gas tanks stored in different places is also not safe fire-wise. So I'm in support. I also want to mention that I like, Bruce, what you said, because there's been talk forever, and when Sustainable Fairfax was around, of having a community tool shed, a community tool library. And these are all things that are attainable by a community like Fairfax. So I don't want us to underestimate the opportunities that we have should we choose to actually downsize our own arsenal and create a community sharing opportunity. So I'm all for this with the January 24 deadline for commercial.
Thanks, Renee. I was going to suggest the community, I forget, doesn't San Anselmo, Sean, have that? Whether you can borrow equipment from the town or rent it out, or?
I'm not familiar
Maybe
with
it's
that program.
Sausalito. I think Melissa Blaustein mentioned that recently. Anyway, I love that idea. So maybe we can explore that downstream. Sean, I just want to thank you for embracing this and doing such a great job, and really, collaborating with the CAC on this. I'm really excited to see this come to fruition. I too am in favor of pushing up the commercial date to the 2024. And I also just wanted to share, if it wasn't clear, that there are members of the CAC that actively work on communication and community engagement. We have Instagram, we have Twitter. We're also planning to do a flyer on this and get it posted at Fairfax Lumber, distributed at the Fairfax Festival and other tabling events. So we're very committed to using all communication channels. Obviously, the town newsletter. I like the idea of doing a letter drop on it as well. But you will see the CAC really put a lot of energy behind communication, and I'll personally commit to that. I think that's all I wanted to share. I'm just really delighted again to see this finally come to fruition.
If I could just throw in one quick comment. We had a fire a decade ago, but seems like yesterday, just right almost across the street from me. And that burned part of 2 houses, burned down a carport. And the cause of the fire was that the person who lived there at that time was a tree worker and had chainsaws and had gasoline and the oil that you add to the gasoline in the carport. And that's what caught on fire. It was actually an extension cord that sparked the fire, but that was what made this place go up. So there's, in terms of fire danger, there's a cost to having all this gasoline equipment sitting in the garages where the cars are no longer parked. Just thought I'd throw that out. Just thought about it now.
Thank you. Barbara, are you?
I don't want to make a motion. I want to ask that under section 8.74.050, it talks about scope and limitations of the chapter, and there is no temporary extension allowed under that. It's basically if there's just a lack of commercially available equipment and or cost comparable equipment. I'm wondering if the council would accept the idea of adding D, which would allow the town manager or designee the ability to provide an additional extension of 6 months if somebody so requested.
On the basis of financial hardship or what have you?
Something like that, yeah.
I like that a lot from an equity standpoint. I think that's.
Yeah, and
That's
so
right.
I think I would have to ask the town attorney to actually write it, but I would say something about in the event, maybe I'll try and then maybe you can fix something in the event that there is a financial hardship, that a resident
As determined by the town manager?
Well, it would have to be a resident, would have to request it, right?
Yes, there'd have to be some criteria for determining hardship too.
Yeah, so could you suggest language for D?
For a hardship waiver, what we want to do is we want to identify who's going to make the determination and the type of information that would need to be presented to make that determination. Let's think of something else we can liken it to, some other type of hardship waiver. Income-based. What do you suggest?
Well, so here's what I'm thinking is in the event of a financial hardship, a resident may request a 6-month extension, temporary extension of the town manager or designee demonstrating the financial hardship of acquiring the replacement tools. So maybe we don't have to define exactly what it is. And it's only a 6-month extension.
How about we'll call it a financial hardship and say upon application. Upon application, they can be granted a 6-month hardship, so it wouldn't necessarily be a determination that needs to be made by anybody.
Yeah, I think if we keep it simple and all we're talking about is 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, we're only talking about 6 months.
Yes.
I do have concerns about, I mean, I've heard what everybody said. I don't want to vote no on this. I'm hoping that with this temporary extension, I would feel comfortable with voting for this because I think it is a good ordinance. So maybe you could say the words, Janet.
Well, I would recommend that there be upon application a 6-month financial hardship that would be waiver that would for the time limit that would be available. And we can, if that concept is okay with the council, if that is something that we passed, then that's something that we could include in the exact language we would include it. And it would only be a one-time 6-month hardship.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
Would that work?
And then how would we sort of phase in this 6-month warning letter? It would just be from.
Well, okay, so just think about this. If you get a 6-month extension, either you've already gotten a warning letter that you haven't done it. Because, I mean, in theory, we're going to do this mail out to the town and people are going to know. Okay, but for the most part, you would say, you know, I, Barbara Kohler, need a 6-month extension. I don't have time to replace or I don't have the money to replace all my equipment. All it is 6 months. Not everybody's going to apply for it. And then I could get a warning letter after that if I hadn't replaced it.
So it'd be effectively extending this whole thing for a year.
It's not, okay, I just want to push back a little bit. It's not extending it for everybody. Somebody has to apply.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm really concerned about the deadlines that you all are placing, and I do not want to vote no on this ordinance. And there is no ability for any other extension other than saying, I can't find it, there's no commercially available equipment, or there's no cost comparable. And to add to what the mayor said, it's kind of an equity thing.
I don't have any problem with it.
I'm fine with it. I don't think we're going to see a lot of abuse of it.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable concept. I'm just wondering if we need to get it written tonight in order to do this first reading.
Well, we do have to get it written.
No, what we can do is if we can approve it in concept, we'll, you know, this comes back to you on second reading, but what we'll have is we'll have the language say that it will be a one-time 6-month financial hardship waiver that can be granted, that will be granted upon application. A one-time 6-month financial hardship waiver shall be granted upon application.
I think that's great.
Okay.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Barbara.
If I could just chime in real quick, because I just want to make sure I understand as well. So, because it does just talk about in C, that part of that documentation could include a statement of financial hardship. So I just want to make sure that someone couldn't apply for this extension and then also apply for this exemption that can be up to 2 years,
No, Sean,
and that they're not trying to take
You're not
advantage of
reading
it
it correctly. And C, it's specifically requiring that it says and. So it's not an or. So what you're having is the person has to include a list in C. This is a D that includes a list of equipment suppliers contacted, a price comparison, and a statement of financial hardship. That's a separate thing. We're talking about this. This is just a one-time financial hardship, period. They don't have to do anything else as far as saying they can't find the equipment, etc. So it's separate. It's a D item. Does that make sense? With C, they have to provide a whole litany of things.
Yeah, and reading that now, I understand, because that when I was writing the staff report, that was meant to be examples of what could be provided in this case, and not necessarily meant to be inclusive of all those things. But I think adding what you're saying with the temporary extension for financial hardship sounds reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great,
and this,
thank
this
you.
C and D wouldn't be both used by the same person. If someone
No.
applied for the 6-month extension, that would preclude saying, oh, and also, or well, let's just say if someone came in with item C and said they couldn't find the equipment and that was determined, then that extension would pass the period of the other extension. That would be the item D extension would be null and void, because I guess what I'm saying is it sounds like from what we're talking about that this possible 6-month extension would be the first 6 months of the program. It would extend it to where it would delay 6 months for that person who had applied due to that financial hardship. It wouldn't be.
Looks
6
like
months
Janet
later
wants
on.
to say something. Janet, do you want to raise your hand?
Do you want to, yes, thank you. Do you want to make this just for residents, not contractors?
I think that was what I was suggesting.
Is that your intent?
Yeah.
So we would add in that this one-time 6-month waiver would be for residents only and not commercial contractors.
Right.
So that means not a commercial contractor who's a resident. I mean, no, when you say no commercial contractors, we mean no commercial contractors, we mean residents only, individuals.
That was what I was thinking of.
Yep.
So, okay.
You ready for a motion?
I was thinking that Mr. Ackerman might like to make that motion.
Okay, I'll do that. And I need to read a lot of stuff at the beginning, don't I? This is going to be a long one. No, it's not that long. Okay. I move to introduce and waive first reading and read by title only an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax, amending section 1.08.020A, violations designated infractions of Title I of the Fairfax Municipal Code, and adding chapter 8.74, gasoline powered landscape equipment, to Title 8 of the Fairfax Municipal Code, with the addition of a provision that if a resident in this first year of this coming into effect, which would be in 2023, that if a resident applied stating that they had a financial hardship, that they could be granted a one-time 6-month extension on the provisions of this.
Also, are you going to change the date as well for commercial?
Oh, I wasn't sure we had consensus on that.
Well, I heard 3 in favor, so it's up to you to make the motion.
Okay, let's go with it. So changing the effective date for landscape professionals from 2025 as it's written to 2024, January.
I'll
1st.
second. Michelle, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goddard,
Yes.
Councilmember Kohler,
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cutrano,
Yes.
and Mayor Hellman.
Yes. And thank you, Barbara, for that suggestion. I think it was a good one. Thank you again, Sean, for your work on this.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. I'm sorry, I lost all my paperwork. One second. I don't think we're going to have a town manager's report this evening.
Just could I ask a quick clarifying question, Mayor?
Sure.
Maybe of the clerk. Do we need a motion in a second to waive the 10 o'clock rule?
No, you have no more items on your agenda, really.
Oh, okay.
All that's left.
Is, talk about future agenda items.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Sure.
Thanks for keeping us honest, Chance. Okay, moving on, future agenda items. Anyone want to have any? I raised one earlier this evening, so I'd like that to be captured, but other than that, anyone?
I'm sorry, what were you asking?
The discussion on our unsheltered population.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have some either Ashley from the county or someone just give us an update on like where we're at with everything, and yeah, it'd be really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand they're coming regularly. They were here today.
And were you thinking in more of a presentation form, like Ashley coming, or in a discussion agenda item? I would recommend a presentation.
I don't want a presentation on generic programs that are available. I want a deep dive into our unique situation here. So there's just a lot of questions and concerns that we need to address in the community. So we've had Ashley in the past, and there's a lot of information that's publicly available. I think we owe it to the public to have a discussion about Fairfax.
I would be very happy to work with you on crafting what it is that
Great.
Would contain.
Well, I was thinking it would be the two of you, since you're on the county homeless subcommittee.
That's fine. That's actually far more appropriate. Thank you.
But I don't want to volunteer Chance.
No, I think
I was happy to do it. That's why I was sort of assuming, but
sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I was just thinking that it was Stephanie bringing it. But absolutely, I welcome to work with Chance.
Okay. All right. So with that, I think, I'm sorry, do we have
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a dedication this evening? No, it doesn't look like we do. Okay.
Happy Pride Month.
Yes, indeed. Happy Pride Month, and
thank you all.
be well.
Thank you, everyone.
And get well, Heather.